It's my birthday, and instead of a party with candles and frosting, I thought we'd do something a little different. Unwrap the real gift that changed my life, mastering the mental side of weight. For decades, I fought with food, rules, and endless cycles of starting over tomorrow. What really broke that cycle wasn't another diet, it was learning how to train my mind for long-term freedom. So, in this episode, I'm going to get into the nitty-gritty and share the principles that help me step off the merry-go-round of the struggle and stay at my healthiest weight for over 30 years. Think of it as setting the stage for a new kind of game, one where you finally get to win. So, come on in and join the party. Did you know that our struggle with weight doesn't start with the food on your plate or get fixed in the gym? 80% of our weight struggle is mental. That's right. The key to unlocking long-term weight release and management begins in your mind. Hi there, I'm Rita Black. I'm a clinical hypnotherapist, weight loss expert, best-selling author, and the creator of the Shift Weight Mastery process. And not only have I helped thousands of people over the past 20 years achieve long-term weight mastery, I am also a former weight struggler, carb addict, and binge eater. And after 2 decades of failed diets and fad weight loss programs, I lost 40 pounds with the help of hypnosis. Not only did I release all that weight, I have kept it off for 25 years. Enter the Thin Thinking podcast, where you too will learn how to remove the mental roadblocks that keep you struggling. I'll give you the thin thinking tools, skills, and insights to help you develop the mindset you need, not only to achieve your ideal weight, but to stay there long term and live your best life. Sound good? Let's get started. Hello, hello, and come on in. Welcome to my party. Please have a seat. You are a guest of honor. I am so glad that you are here and joining me with friends from our Thin Thinking community all over the world. I'm so honored that you're here. And so I wanted to make your time worthwhile. It's my birthday, so, well, if you're listening around September 10th, otherwise it's not my birthday anymore. Although sometimes we can stretch our birthday into weeks and months, right? So anyway, I'm not one of those people though. I slide in on the day, I slide out. And other than my mentioning it on the podcast, my birthday, 61, is a pretty low key birthday this year, other than my time with you. So have a seat. Like I said, not a party with food, but we are going to be playing a game, the inner game of long-term weight mastery. But there are some rules we will be discussing, and these are the golden rules that have allowed me to take off 40 pounds and keep them off for over 30 years. Not diet rules like don't eat this, don't eat that, yada yada. This is going to be the inner stuff, the way to use your mind to win the game. Because if you've been struggling with weight, your mind has been rigged to work against you and against long-term weight loss success in many ways. So here are some ways that our mind just is naturally rigged, not even your fault. For many of you who are my students or, have been in my thin thinking world, we have that 1288 principle. 12% of our mind, our conscious mind, wants to release weight. The other 88%, our beliefs, our identity, our habits, our imagination, all these things are the subconscious mind wants things to stay the same and will fight hard to keep the status quo. And then on top of that, our brain is negativity biased. That means that it's always looking out and thinking negative things because that's a survival mechanism. So looking out, perfectionistic, don't do this, oh, you blew it. Yeah. And then there's this thing called the Dunning-Kruger effect, which you may have heard me speak about in a previous episode, I'm going to get into a little later. It's very fascinating. And we also have a comfort trap in our brain. Food isn't just fuel. As you know, it's all these other things. It's comfort, it's celebration, it's stress relief and escape. And the mind resists letting go of something that has multiple emotional jobs until those needs are met in new ways. The brain is going to fight to pull you back into old patterns. Don't we know it? But never fear, with these inner game of long-term weight mastery rules, there are some mind shifts that I'm going to share with you that I made on my journey. And this is going to be covered in two podcast episodes because I don't want you sitting here all day. So today we're going to look at what it takes to release the weight. And next week, we're going to look at what it takes to keep it off for 30 years. For many, that is the hard part. The rules are similar, interestingly, but the mindset is a bit different. So before we get out the game board, so to speak, and set it up, I want you to know that we are coming up to the live fall 2025 Shift Weight Mastery process. It's starting this upcoming September 17th, very soon. And I am going to be doing a free info session this coming Saturday, September 13th at 2 p.m. Pacific Standard Time to do some teaching about the mind, using it more effectively for long-term weight release, because as we know, it works against us, and about also doing some, and we'll do a hypnosis session. So if you've never tried hypnosis before, it's a great session and you can test drive hypnosis. And I will walk through what the Shift Weight Mastery process is all about. So if you are curious or if you are on the fence, if you've been thinking about this, please come. I will answer your questions. I will also have some former students there who will be coaches in the upcoming process who have released their weight and have been keeping it off as well. So they have been on their journey. And yeah, if you're interested in learning more, please come. Again, Saturday the 13th. The link is in the show notes, or you can go to www.shiftweightmastery.com. That's shiftweightmastery.com/info. Keep it easy, /info, www.shiftweightmastery.com/info. Okay, now let's get out the game board and look at the rules of the inner game. I just love this because I just played Monopoly with my kids, and this is what made me think of this episode. We bought a new Monopoly board because ours was old and crusty and it was falling apart and the money was all wet and weird, and we lost all the, the little guys that go around the board. So we bought this new Monopoly, and it's a little different. It's a little more streamlined. It's the same though. Like if you're worried about, no, it's all it's the same boardwalk and Park Place and the electric company and the railroads and all that stuff. It looks pretty much the same, but it's lighter. So I think they're conserving, materials. Um, the pieces that you push around the board are a little more, that they seem a little different. And the money looks the same. It's a little thinner. But yeah, there was this rule packet. And because my son loves to cheat. And I had to call him out he was calling me out. He was like, "You're doing this here." I was like, no, this is a thing. You do this. And he's like, no. And I was like, yes, let me get the rules out. And I got the rules out, and sure enough, there were some, I was right. I love being right. But yeah, and then there were some rules, interestingly, like that you could look at different ways. So I thought, and I was like, this is so interesting. And I don't like to think of weight management as like rules, like these rigid things, but there's principles. There's, things that we can hang our hat on, especially the inner rules. We all know diet rules, which are boring and they're outside of us. But I think these inner principles are very solid. And so I'm looking forward to diving them in with them. But it was all inspired by a Monopoly game. We went away for a week. I hadn't seen both of my kids in the same place for over a year because my daughter had gone away for a year to Europe to teach and to do stuff and to have adventures. And now she's back home and, applying for master's degrees and stuff like that. Very serious adult stuff. So she's really glad she took that year off. Now, Speaking of that, journeying and, being playing the game. So here is rule number one. We're going to dive right in. Be on a hero's journey, not a shame sprint. Be on a hero's journey and not a shame sprint. So I have worked with over 12,000 students over 20 years, and something that I'm keenly aware of, and maybe you are too, is that there is a very well-worn path to about 10 to 20 pounds down the scale. We all know how to get there. um, and then the path gets a little overgrown, right? So there's this well-worn tourist path, that the people march up, on the, I remember last year we climbed up Mount Rainier in the state of Washington. And there's this very, it's like a asphalt path. And, you go up like a quarter of a mile or half a mile. It's pretty flat. It's before you get to the serious hiking. And, that's where everybody goes, and then it stops being an asphalt path. And then it starts being a rock path. And then it starts getting a little harder. And then things, it get narrower and the path isn't even so clear. And so that's kind of the same thing with the road to weight mastery. After, that 10, 20 pounds that we're all used to gaining, losing, but the long-term path of weight mastery, you need a bushwhack to get through it. And why is this? Why? Well, when we struggle with weight, our brain does this crazy thing. We're in great pain, right? We're not maybe in physical pain, but we're just like, oh, why am I overweight? And we're really hard on ourselves. We don't like the feeling of feeling overweight or not fitting in our clothes, feeling chaotic, feeling vulnerable. And we become very vulnerable. We become pretty much willing to do anything to escape that horrible, awful feeling. Now, I know this so well because I struggled for decades. And, my first diet was a really gross diet. It was the Scarsdale diet. It was just like dry toast, grapefruit, meat all day, disgusting. But, that was the beginning for me. And over the years, I did crazy things to my body and crazy diets. I starved myself. I ate tasteless diet food. You know this. We all have done it. Took pills that I bought from I bought pills like these herbal pills from some man out of his back door in Santa Monica, California. I'll never forget that. I was just like, what am I doing? I drove up. I like had to park in this back alley and it was just like it was promised to make me not have any appetite and they made me feel weird and I paid a lot of money and it was just all in the name of not being fat because we are more focused on that. When we're in pain, it's like, I don't want to be fat. I don't like myself. We beat ourselves up and we feel like we're a freak. We don't fit in. And I can't tell you how many times I had been called, really horrible names, by my family, my friends, men I worked for. This was way pre Me Too. Oh my God, just horrible, awful names. And even women I worked for. And then people I didn't even know on the street would say crap to me. And God, I just hated it. I wanted to shrink away and die. I wanted to hide. I wanted just to evaporate into the ether and just not be me anymore. You know what I mean? Like I was so desperate. And here's the thing. When I got gung ho about weight loss, when I got in enough pain, oh boy, I could lose the weight. I knew it. It's a well-worn path to 10 to 20 pounds. But because it wasn't sustainable, because everything I did was just like, I've got to get this off ASAP as fast as possible, nothing was sustainable. And I didn't believe in myself. And I thought I was a lazy, food addicted, crazy woman. And I lived in this narrow little world of self abuse and self sabotage. And I would be willing to spend anything and eat or not eat anything, not to be in that shitty, pardon my friends, but it's that shitty, dark, like world of struggling with my weight. It's a horrible, awful place. And diets to me were an escape hatch. like I got addicted to dieting and weight loss. I could only, like I said, I could get 10 pounds down, 20 pounds down. And sometimes I would get the whole 40, not to be confused with the whole 30, but I could get the whole 40 off of because two things happened. I never kept it off. One, the moment I didn't feel so fat that I got a little thinner, thinner enough that I got out of some pain. And then something changed, the pain that had, spurred me forward dissipated. And I lost that fire under my butt. So I wasn't so in pain anymore. And so I started looking around and food looked a little more appealing and I was a little wishy-washy. And then, I was eating stuff and then I was gaining weight back. And usually the diet wasn't sustainable anyway, right? So I would, go off, get bored, and the weight came back. Sound familiar? Yep. Should, because after a while, it just becomes a habit. It becomes a habit in our brain, going on a diet, going off a diet, going on a diet, going off a diet. And the brain says, hey, this is what we do. Let's just put that on autopilot. So the fact that you can't get consistency isn't your fault. It's just that the brain is in autopilot and will pull you into it. So here's the dilemma. 12% of the mind wants the weight loss, but the other 88% are habits, beliefs, identity, the part that's habituated in the struggle cycle. It just keeps pulling us back. And weight loss, I know I've said it here before, but I can't emphasize how addictive it is. Just we get addicted to feeling good because we're on a plan. It's an addiction. It organizes the chaos we feel. When we're self-seeing ourselves on a plan or a diet, we are looking good to ourselves, which is very rare. So we self-see in this kind of high sort of false way, like, oh, I'm so good. But we know it's not true. It's a hollow high and it's a dopamine high. And it's a false illusion. And we fall off. And the second we fall off, we realize we don't know anything. Like we call ourselves a fool. Like, what made you think you really had it? And we shame ourselves desperately. And to escape the pain of the shame, we eat more and more dopamine. This is good. And, we'll start again tomorrow. So let's eat it even more. And the brain's like, ding, 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 ding. Okay, this is good stuff because this is another crazy thing about the brain. It's like, this feels good. It doesn't see the pain. It doesn't see all that pain we're in. It just sees the high. And so it'll pull us back again and again. Let's do this. That felt good the last time. So one day I had lost weight, and I'm sure if you've known me long enough, if you're a student of mine, you know the story. I got on the scale, it was down, and I, even though it was down, I was just so unhappy. I was so broken. I was just like, I can't even do this anymore. I just knew, even though it was down, it was just going to go back up. And so I just was broken. I just sat down on the scale. I just was like, it was just like all that time and energy and high hopes and then dashed hopes and disappointment. Um, I just was like, I can't do this anymore. And it was a horrible feeling, but at the same time, it was like I went to the deepest, darkest depths of myself. And I was just like, what are you doing? You are wasting your life. And, you know, this is this is like taking your relationships away from you. This is keeping you small. What are you doing? And in a way, it was a blessing, right? And because you meet that feeling within yourself and you kind of meet it with like, no, we're not going to do this anymore. And there's this voice that came up within me, and I bet it comes up in you in those dark moments where it's like, we can do this. We're better than this. We can do this. And we call this in the shift weight mastery process our turning point, where we really just turn away from what isn't working anymore. We stop playing that game, because it's a rigged game, right? And the moment we decide we just can't come from that same place, play those rules anymore, we're just not going to do it. So um, I decided in that moment, I said, Rita, you're never going to diet again, and you are never going to start over again. And I was very clear about that. That moment of clarity when you're just like, nope, we're done, and we're moving forward. I worked at this place. I think some of you may know this. It's called the Old Homestead. It's still there in New York. It's a steakhouse. It looks a lot different than it did in the 80s when I worked there. And it's over in the meat packing district, or what used to be the meat packing district when I worked there. Was like, the meat packers would be out in the early morning, and it was a dangerous neighborhood because it was 80s New York. We'd have to take a cab, just to go 5 blocks because it was so dangerous. But now it's like Rodeo Drive. It's like got all the Gucci stores, and it's really, really fancy. So that's how much New York has changed since I've lived there. But I worked there, and there was this guy, a couple of guys who owned the place. I won't say their names, just, because I won't. But they were New Jersey guys, and they would say, honey, if you lost some weight, you could get a boyfriend. You could have a boyfriend, and he'd probably buy you lobster. Yeah, you could get a boyfriend and make him buy you lobster. These were these guys, these were their rules of the game they played by. And anyway, they would say, if you ever break up with your boyfriend, just keep going. Just keep going. The lights are with you. And so I felt like it was like a keep going, the lights are with you moment. Like, I'm not turning back. I'm just moving forward. That's probably the only time in my life I ever took their advice. Um, but yeah, so it was a turning point moment. And in that moment, I made that decision, and I was going to put faith in my ability to figure out any way forward. And that is how a hero's journey begins. We, uh, talk about the hero's journey a lot in the shift weight mastery process. Kickoff, we have this orientation, and it's really a blast off orientation. We do hypnosis, we do a bunch of cognitive processes to really give you momentum because there is so much crap pulling you back. And so you need that rocket launch to get through that mire of disbelief in yourself, all the resentment you hold against yourself. So we work through that stuff and get to the other side. Because on the other side is you, the true you, the real you that has integrity, has value, uh, that is enough, and that can love yourself down the scale. But there's a lot of crap holding, in that little world of weight struggle that needs to be blasted out and put in the dumpster so that you can move forward. So, and what usually that shows up as is fear, resignation, cynicism, and resistance. If you've ever had, like, a lot of my students will have, coming into the process, like they've been, just get overwhelmed, and I can't do this, and it's too much, and I blah, blah, and their brains literally blow out. And we're like, no, no, just take this one step at a time. And once you kind of get through that mire, you come to the other side. So we leave that struggler identity behind and move into a new world, because that's what we need, is a new world. You can't stay in that struggle world. You have to step out. And this is called a cognitive reframe, right? Like, we're reframing how you see reality, and we're reframing how you see yourself. And this is what you want to do. You want to, new rules, on a new board game, right? You get a new, the player is the same. That's you, your beautiful self, but you have a more self-respecting identity and you're living in a world where you have power and agency and you are the captain of the ship, not some diet outside of you that's just going to shame you ultimately and make you feel bad about yourself. So I decided I was on a hero's journey. And that did something in my brain. It changed my identity. Like I said, I wasn't a struggler anymore. I was going to be a courageous but very humble hero, figuring it out one step, one little baby step at a time, and recognized, hey, there is a lot to learn about myself and the obstacles to be encountered. But what I was really I was excited. The hero's journey, just FYI, is all about the transformational story that most cultures have, the story of the hero leaving the old world and entering into a new world in whatever form that might be. But usually the hero is resistant at first. They don't believe in themselves. And then they have to, something bigger than them calls them into action. They have a guide. Like if you look at Luke Skywalker, it's such a perfect hero's journey. He was reluctant, then, he had his guide. And then he meets the dragon, like the hero always meets the inner dragon at the innermost cave, has to slay the dragon, and comes, back to the village transformed. So as the hero encounters obstacles along the way, uh, they grow, right? And I don't think the diet world poses things to us like that. I think it's just like, be good on this diet and, lose weight. And really, the journey of weight mastery is, uh, really learning, making the unknown the known. And that is what brings growth. So anyway, I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but um, here we are at rule number 2. And I'm going to borrow from one of the greats, Mr. Stephen Covey. I'm going to say rule number 2 is begin with the end in mind. When I was beginning my weight release journey, the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People was a pretty big book at the time. And I had read it. And that one really stuck with me. And I thought about that. And I realized that so many times when I was dieting, it was just all about getting thin, right? Like, I got to get thin. I got to get this weight off. I got to get thin. And that's usually where most diets are focusing you, is just like lose the weight, lose the weight, lose the weight, get thin. But that was the mistake I was making for decades. And I see so many strugglers make it, but it's not about the weight, and all of my coaches who are doing the shift weight mastery process, if you ask them, it's like, oh, it's awesome to, release the weight, but to keep it off, and I'm going to talk about this more next week when we talk about the long-term part. It can't be about the weight because you stop releasing weight. But it's about who you become in the process of releasing weight, working through those obstacles. It becomes about your growing yourself from the inside out. And that's is the focus that turns the game in your favor. Now, the word lose weight or weight loss, loss means we want to find it again. So that's why we use different words in the shift. We use weight release because you release the weight forever. But more important than weight release was the idea of becoming a weight master. So for me, here I was 40 pounds above, what I would consider my ideal weight. And instead of thinking myself thin, prancing around, thinking of myself in the future, prancing around, 6 months from now in a bikini on the beach, okay, maybe I did that a little. But it wasn't the focus. The focus wasn't my body. The focus was on me. And the questions I asked myself We're about me. Like, who is that Rita in my vision of the future? That Rita has transformed herself um, into a long-term weight vision. In the shift, we don't just focus you on achieving ideal weight, but we focus you on 5 years out when you have been maintaining your weight for that long. And that's where I think the magic is that length of focus. Because again, when we're struggling with our weight, the focus is like, I just want to be thin in a month. Let me cut off my arm. Let me, eat dirt and water for a month because some of those diet drinks taste like that. Or, let me do whatever I need to, because I've got to be skinny soon. I'm not skinny, but I've just got to get this weight off of myself so that I can love myself. But we don't realize that we're not loving ourselves, we're not owning ourselves and loving ourselves down the scale, and then we lose the weight, but then we feel like an imposter because we don't have that ownership and we don't even still, let me lose more because I still don't love myself yet. I see this a time and time again. So that's why it's just so important to develop yourself and to see yourself out in that future. Who is that you? It's so empowering for your mind. You know, that Rita, I would say to myself, isn't the same Rita here today, not because she's thinner, but because she's gone on this courageous journey. And she created a way of eating that she loved. And that way of eating actually allows her to live life at her ideal weight. And there's an answer for that. There is a way forward through that. I don't have that answer yet, which is scary, but I know that it exists. It's just this big amorphous blob right now, but I just have to take that first action step. But that first action step is moving towards that and not moving towards being skinny. It's moving towards that Rita who has created something and has developed herself. Does that make sense? She had to create a way of eating and exercising consistently. I didn't know what the heck that would look like, but I just started taking baby steps, and I started just being with my feelings and allowing my feelings of fear. Sometimes I sit down and like today, I was like, oh, I'm going to record the podcast. And sometimes I have fear, because I get vulnerable and I'm like, oh, am I going to say something, idiotic? And, um, and I just, I'm like, yeah, Rita, you probably will. And that's okay. I didn't talk to myself like that. I used to just say, yeah, you're an idiot. Don't do it. Just don't do it. Don't take that risk. But now I just like feel the fear and it's cool. Be courageous and do it anyway. And it's all going to be okay. You give yourself kudos for just putting yourself out there, right? So life is so much better when you can talk to yourself like that. You know what I mean? But I didn't have that. I didn't have any of that, but I just started with what I could do. And that little voice that was encouraging began to grow within me. And it wasn't always strong at first. And sometimes that critic would get in there and beat me up again. But that voice would say, no, 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 don't listen to that voice. You listen to me. We're just doing this one step at a time, and we really, really do not have to do this perfectly. It is not going to be, it's going to be highly imperfect. And the more mistakes we make, the more we learn. And mistakes equal learning. So be brave, keep going, keep going. And, that Rita, 40 pounds down the scale, probably isn't night eating or binging or secret eating. That Rita out there 5 years from now would have gone through 5 holiday seasons without overeating. I'd never done that before. I gained 30 pounds one Christmas. I'm serious. Um, you know, that Rita's gone out with friends. She's traveled. She's maintained her weight. How did she do that? I don't know. But the one thing that Rita could help the Rita present. That Rita in the future could start to talk to the Rita in the present. That Rita in the future could start to communicate. And she could start to, when I would be like, what would Rita in the future do? Answers would start to come and help me figure it out. So this vision worked because it was engaging my reticular activation system, which is something in our brain that helps us with vision and helps us get focused and get rid of all the crap that is distracting. And also the vision work is in the imagination, and our imagination is in our subconscious mind. So I started leveraging my subconscious in a better way. Started getting in there using hypnosis, meditation. I'd used hypnosis to quit smoking. So I already kind of had some access to using hypnosis and knowing that it could really help my subconscious mind. So I had this new identity. I was a learner on a hero's journey. I was stepping out of my limiting beliefs that defined my weight struggle. Started getting curious about the beliefs that Rita at her ideal weight 5 years from now, long-term mastery, believed in herself. That lady could walk past tempting foods and not think twice about them. Unbelievable. She believed she could ask her husband and friends to support her choices and not feel selfish. Who knew? You know, and habits too, because I reframed my world and the path I was on. It was easier to let go of patterns that used to hold me and get curious about the habits and skills I would need to develop to support my life of weight mastery. So that is, how I began humbly, beginning with the end in mind, really helped me define that path I was on and who I was beginning to become. And that was great. But I also had a lot of fear and resistance to this new path. And because the weight struggle is painful and frustrating, and it's so familiar and comfy, though. So stepping out of that world, that weight struggle world, I literally felt buck naked sometimes. Like my mind felt like jello. I was overwhelmed and woozy. And that's because you're literally bringing yourself into this new world, and the brain is going to rebel and resist. And it wants to know before we go any further, like, I need to know. I need to know these things. Like I need to know I'm safe. So here's rule number 3. Make friends with your resistance, fear, and overwhelm. Don't push them down. Befriend them. The first stage of the hero's journey, like I was saying earlier, is the reluctant hero. So maybe you've been feeling reluctant, not wanting to start, feeling overwhelmed. Who cares? It's been too long. I'm too old. It's never going to happen for me. Doesn't even matter anymore, right? But it does. It really does, because this isn't about the weight. It's about your relationship with yourself. And I really realized as I started out, I didn't know anything. And there was so much fear and that inner voice, that inner critic. You can't do this. It's too hard and you're going to fail. And then where are you going to be? Lost. Lost. And then also that little rebel, the part of us that tempts us all the time to play small. Oh, just take the easy road. The easy road of tempting foods. Come on. You'll do it later. You'll do it next year. It's too late. The holidays are coming. Oh, your birthday's coming. Oh, something's always coming, and it's always too overwhelming. So often I see people struggle with resistance and overwhelm. And in the days, especially, like I said earlier, of just making a big change, we tend to do one of two things. We either say, yeah, you're right. This is way too much for me. I can't do it. And we give up. Or we push down the feelings and keep going, but we still feel that fear and resistance, which will cause us to give up really easily pretty early on in the game. So here's what I invite you to do. And this is something we work on in the Shift Weight Mastery process. Because my friends, until you can really, be with your fear and resistance and love it and own it and work with it, it's always going to be the boss of you. Always. But when you get underneath it and you bring that sense of curiosity, which I know you have, and love, which I know you've got lots of, to your fear and resistance, you get to be the boss. In the story of the hero's journey, like I said, the hero decides to go on the journey, step into the new world, because the pain of staying the same finally becomes greater than the pain of the fear of the unknown. And the opportunity for transformation calls the hero so powerfully to be the best they can be. And we all have that yearning within us to be the best we can be. So, in order to move forward on my journey, this is what I decided to do. When I felt the fear, I talked to the fear. I asked the fear, what are you afraid of? Fear of me? And my fear spoke back. It said, failure. I'm afraid to fail. And then so I asked it another question. I said, okay, I get you. Well, what if we fail? What is the worst thing that could happen? I never asked myself that question before. Like it was just like one layer down because I would just always give up. We don't think our fear through to the core. We just react. And so often it feels so primitive. It feels like we're going to die. Like underneath that fear is like death. So I asked myself, so what are you so afraid of? And I stood up to my fear and I said, if we fail, what's going to happen? And the fear was that we would be upset with ourselves, right? That, I'm going to feel foolish. I'm going to feel lost. And I realized what I feared was my abusive inner critic yelling at me and mocking on me for believing in myself. That was my fear. It's crazy how self-abusive our inner critic is and how we develop almost a post-traumatic stress disorder from this abusive relationship. So much to the extent that we're afraid to try for fear of the abuse, of being hit down again. And we see ourselves as a failure. I had so many people in my life, like I said earlier, make fun of me over the years. I mean, and say some really horrible things and do really horrible things to me. And, around weight, very hurtful things. But no one ever held a candle to my own mocking, cruel, and vindictive inner critic. They all seemed angelic compared to her. So this is what holds us back. It's not so much the fear of looking bad to others, but it's the fear of looking bad to ourselves. But what if we created a powerful cheerleader within, an inner coach that silenced the critic and applauded us when we took a risk? And when things didn't look good, instead of punishing us, our inner critic would say, hey, kid, good job. You tried. And something didn't quite work here. But what are those things? Let's get curious about that because I want to learn how to do it different the next time. And we can fix this. So here's the challenge we face. 90% of the journey of long-term weight mastery, I repeat, is not, and I repeat, it is not anything about being good on a plan or anything about willpower. but it's something a little different and it needs courage and it needs a powerful cheerleader because what the journey of weight mastery is at deep down, it's about turning the unknown into the known. And sometimes that is not going to look good and it's going to feel awkward. And sometimes it's not going to look good to our perfectionistic inner critic. And sometimes we have to say things that might be uncomfortable, like we have to say no thanks to our mom when she pushes a second helping at us. We never knew how to say no yet, but there's a way you can say no to your mom and her feelings don't get hurt and you get to not have to eat a second helping to please her. There is a way, but you don't know how to do that yet, maybe. And it might feel awkward at first. I'm going to read you something. I didn't make this up, but it's so appropriate for what I'm talking about. When you're not used to being confident, confidence feels like arrogance. When you're used to being passive, assertiveness feels like aggression. When you're not used to getting your needs met, prioritizing yourself feels selfish. Your comfort zone is not a good benchmark. Isn't that awesome? So appropriate here. So stretching ourselves and becoming who we deserve to be and asking for what we need and showing up for ourselves. It feels awkward at first, but we're turning the unknowns into the known. And that's why you need an inner coach. You know enough about losing weight to write your own diet book, but you're not maintaining your ideal weight long term. Or if you're not, you don't have that skill set yet. And that isn't a bad thing. It's just something that you want to acknowledge and understand. It's not about being smarter or more disciplined or willpower, but it's about being willing to turn the unknowns into the known and guiding yourself on that journey. And that's where hypnosis and meditation and our inner coach really come in. These were my biggest allies in shifting my mind. So I had 100% of my mind working towards my vision and learning all the lessons of my weight mastery with patience and respect for what I was doing and who I was becoming. So, yes, I had resistance and I had a lot of fear along the way, but I had my inner coach and the ability to be with my resistance, and I turned it into curiosity and learned a lesson that allowed me to move forward. And you can too. So I was releasing weight and working with myself, and I felt all great and not like the dieting high, but that I was actually building myself from the inside out, and it felt more real. And I was owning my progress. And instead of being afraid it was going to all fall away, I felt like I was, really definitely moving step by step forward, even on the bad days. I definitely overate. This path did not look clean. I made a lot of bad choices, a lot of trial and error, a lot of, banging my head and going, what did I just do? That was just not a good choice. And I struggled with consistency, but I kept going, allowing myself to learn every step along the way and not punishing myself. I just kept cheering myself on. Even some days when it was like, I don't feel like cheering you on, but we're just going to keep going. Some days we crawled forward, we did not walk. But then, I did hit a fork in the road. I had released some weight, figuring out things. And I felt like I kept seeing that Rita, my future, had this confidence. And I wasn't there yet. I felt like there was this big hole missing because I was doing good. I was making, healthy choices and throwing some stuff together, but I didn't feel like I had an inner framework yet. like an operating system. And I did some research and I realized that there, studies long-term weight release, there were common principles, skills, things that people were, doing, showing up to, habits that they formed that were all very similar, even though these people didn't necessarily know each other. There were some common behaviors that they engaged in. And so, rule 4 of the inner game is instead of being good, we need to build the skill set of weight mastery. And from what I learned, I boiled them, and because I like to keep things easy, I boiled them down to 3 skill sets. Um, weight skills, environment skills, and mind skills. I just bought a little weight rack. I was so proud of myself because, I'm doing resistance training because, now I'm a lady of mature years. And, it's really important for us mature ladies to maintain our muscle tone, for longevity. That's my game now. It's my game of longevity, as I have a very big goal of, seeing my son retire. And I had him when I was 40. So you put the numbers together, you know what that means. And my students all know I'm going to wear a red dress at his retirement party or his 60th birthday, one of those things out there in the future. And I have a neighbor, Frida, who I'm modeling myself on, who just turned 101 yesterday. I went to her 100th birthday party last year, and my husband's been sick, so I didn't go because I didn't want to, give her germs. But yeah, so I've got people around me that I'm like, okay, Frida, what are you doing? And Frida would take the bus every day to the community center and work out, like not work out hard, but she would walk around the park. She would play mahjong. I think that's the longevity thing too. I got to learn. That's another podcast episode. I think I've got a friend of mine, one of um, my friends who is into mahjong. I said, okay, you've got to teach me how to play that. So I just bought this weight rack and I have different weights for different muscle groups. And they all work together though, right? Like I've got to work on my quads, I've got to work on my biceps, and then I got to work on my back muscles. And and believe me, I'm not looking anything like the serious weightlifters, but I do my daughter, laughs at my lady weights. Um, but it's they all my muscles are working together and all these skills work together, the weight skills, the environment skills, and the mind skills. And the, weight skills are the things that when we're being good on a diet, that's what we're like, oh, I'm being good on a diet. And, it's like eating healthy and exercising and the stuff that, helps you actually, your body actually release weight. I would call those skills though, instead of like being good, um, you're developing skills. But then there are environment skills, and those are the tougher skills. Those are the skills of like, getting support and the people in your life on your team. I mean, because you think about this, people, it's long-term permanent weight mastery. You're not going to be an island. You got to get the people, and that takes skill. And like I said, saying no thank you to your mama and getting her on your team, that takes some figuring out, right? It's an unknown and that has to become known. Or asking your husband to help you, that's an unknown. If he's a little stubborn, that's got to become a known. And it doesn't always have a straight path forward, and it's not always obvious. And that takes an inner coach. I've had to have some conversations in my life because we teach people how to treat us, right? And we got to unteach them environment skills and then our mind skills, which is a lot of what we've been talking about already. So with my coach and my vision and my hypnosis and meditation, the skills I was building, I, I could see how much I was a novice and needing to keep building. So I kept supporting myself, and slowly the skills became more and more who I was and less as something I had to be conscious about. And I reached my ideal weight about 9 months into my journey. and I felt pretty solid. Like I knew I could own my release. And I was well on my way to becoming that long-term weight masterful me. Yes, you think hitting that weight feels good, and you think, oh, the butterflies are going to be let out of the cage and the unicorn gallops up and takes you off into the sunset. But no, it's actually a lot different. And frankly, ultimately, a lot better than that. But releasing weight and getting there to your ideal weight is just the beginning. There is a lot more inner game to be played with more rules to learn as I continue my journey. Things like not feeling vulnerable in my smaller body, training my family and friends, as I mentioned before, going through really tough times, life, AKA life, 30 years of it, things like death and menopause and children and but going through it. And so I'll be sharing that all with you next week. But I hope you've enjoyed this. And please, please come to my info session this Saturday if you want more coaching. And let's do some hypnosis. And let me answer your questions and qualms about participating in the amazing Fall 2025 Shift Weight Mastery process. This is going to be so great. There's so much magic in this process, and not because of hypnosis and woo woo and all that. It's magic because a group of really amazing people, more than almost 50 coaches who have some weight mastery under their belts, are making themselves available to coach you and guide you. I'm there to coach you and guide you. And it's this amazing community of love and showing up for you when you don't even want to show up for yourself, and believing in you when you don't even want to believe in yourself. It's a great environment for an amazing transformation, for you to really step into the shoes of being your weight masterful self. And like I said, it's not even about the weight, although that is a really great side effect. It's really about you believing in yourself and becoming your best you. So www.shiftweightmastery.com/info, or the link is in the show notes. There'll be lots and lots of other people going through this process. We have an amazing group of people going through this process. So I hope I can answer your questions on Saturday. And have a great week. And remember that the key, and probably the only key to unlocking the door of the weight struggle, is inside you. So keep listening and find it. And I will be here with you next week for part 2 of the inner game of long-term weight mastery. Thank you. See you soon. You want to dive deeper into the mindset of long-term weight release? Head on over to www.shiftweightmastery.com. That's www.shiftweightmastery.com, where you will find numerous tools and resources to help you unlock your mind for permanent weight release, tips, strategies, and more. And be sure to check the show notes to learn more about my book, From Fat to Thin Thinking: Unlock Your Mind for Permanent Weight Loss.